So I was looking up reviews on Christchurch, of Christchurch, and then it kind of dawned on me once I started reading the reviews, because they were a lot of glowing reviews, that the thing is, if the people that are within the group wouldn't be within the group if they didn't think it was the dogs' doodahs. So, and I don't want to use the word brainwashing, but if it is a bit cult-like, then there could be, arguably, a bit of brainwashing going on, certainly for younger people that are born into it. People that choose to go into it are choosing to go into it because they already have the same values and mindset. So, but having said that, we have this review. I stand with Natalie Rose Greenfield. Research her name before attending. Okay. So here's Natalie Greenfield. This is a 2016 article. Natalie Greenfield stands in front of the home on B Street in Moscow where she lived as a teenager. Greenfield spoke Thursday at the University of Idaho about the sexual abuse and subsequent shaming she suffered during her teenage years while attending Christchurch in Moscow. Do you know what? I mean, not commenting on what's actually being said there, but more, well, that the University of Idaho is playing both sides. And I know that there's such a massive emphasis on free speech in America, but it should be free speech within the law. And a lot of the speech that is coming out of the mouths of these people, I don't know what the law is on equality but that would be against the Equality Act in the UK. So I'm not sure what an equivalent law is. I'm assuming there is one. In the USA, you can't just, because there's certain protected sections of society, and you can't, people who are marginalised and people who have been discriminated against in the past, for example, women weren't allowed to vote previously, so I don't even need to list the numerous ways. And so really, if Idaho should be protecting the young women at its school. I mean, the University of Idaho, should be protecting the young women at its school by not letting these people come to the school. But I've realised that there has to be something in it for U of I. And EMSI, which is now Lightcast, is the biggest employer in the city. It takes on loads of graduates. And they've also, their new premises, I'm not sure when it was finished. I know that in 2019 they proposed new premises, and it's a global company, so they've got a lot of clout. they worked with the campus to create it. I'm just trying to see if I can quickly show you what I mean before we... Hold on. You see, I forget to go back to it. That's why I have to do this. Look, Lightcast headquarters and campus master plan. As the world headquarters, 500 employees utilised the building, providing software development, engineering, data science, economists and sales. I don't even fully understand what it does, the purpose of it in practical terms. But they've worked together. 67,000 square foot premises. So yeah, Christchurch, University of Idaho's just sold out basically in terms of its values, or it already had the values in the first place, and it sold out in favour of making money. Jeff Crimmins, that name's come before. Former Moscow resident speaks on sexual abuse, shaming that followed. Natalie Greenfield, at the age of 13, met the man who would become her abuser while she was at a Christchurch function in Moscow. For the 7 months following that first meeting, the 23-year-old pastor in training was grooming her, building trust and friendship, she said. Not sure that I can I? Just click on it, you silly sod. She said, then he moved in with us along with several other boarders. She said, within weeks of moving in, he started sexually abusing me. Greenfield spoke Thursday night at the University of Idaho as a keynote speaker for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. She also sat down prior to her presentation for a one-on-one talk with the Daily News. Greenfield, now 28, lived in an 8-bedroom, 3-storey home in Moscow with her parents and 4 siblings. It's typical for Christchurch families to house boarders from Greyfriars Seminary and New St Andrews College, she said. During the year and a half of abuse, Greenfield said she was completely infatuated and obsessed with her abuser. At that age, she said, she thought she was in love. Greenfield said her abuser made sure she knew that everything was her fault, keeping her right where he wanted, afraid to tell anyone what was happening. I didn't have any sex education, she said. All I got was from this nasty guy. Her family's home was a mecca for church activities at the time and always buzzing with people, and there was an underlying sense of trust in those people, whether or not it was merited, she said. By all outward appearances, her abuser was handsome, charming, godly, personable and respectable, she said, but he was also sneaky. Greenfield said he would oil the door hinges so they wouldn't squeak as he snuck into her bedroom at night when the majority of the assaults happened. He also had rules for her, such as burning or flushing notes between them. because he was sneaky and in pastoral training, no one... I can't believe how regularly they cut the grass out there. That lawnmower is always there. Because he was sneaky and in pastoral training, no one suspected the abuse was happening, she said. Near the end, Greenfield said she believes her father got suspicious and he would even sit in the hallway outside her room some nights. It wasn't until her father found her abuser hiding behind a bush in the yard and spying on her and a group of others inside the home that he was kicked out of the house, she said. Greenfield said when the abuse ended, she began to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and an eating disorder. Everything about that religion is all about guilt, she said. I thought God was punishing me for these sins. By that point, I was really messed up. Greenfield kept the abuse to herself until just before she turned 18, when she told a friend who pushed her to tell her parents. Greenfield said she figured her parents would be upset, call the police, that there may be a trial and he would go to jail and be labelled a sex offender. The result was quite different. Greenfield said her parents called the police and her abuser was arrested, but Christchurch fought for him tooth and nail. She alleges the church told her parents not to go to trial, and church members wrote to the court on her abuser's behalf and brought her own character into question, she said. I didn't expect to be shamed, she said. There were so many moments then where I wished I had suffered in silence. The case went to mediation and he was sentenced to 1 year in prison for 1 count of injury to a child. He served 4 months and didn't have to register as a sex offender, she said. He got off scot-free. Greenfield said Christchurch sent clear messages they supported him, not her. Trying to move forward, Greenfield said she received none of the emotional, physical or psychological support she needed. So I left, she said. I remember just sitting there thinking, what do I do now? I just lost faith in humanity for a while. Christchurch also formally excommunicated her from the church as well, she said. It was during that time she also met her husband, Wesley Peterson. He was the first person to treat me with love and respect, she said. The couple now has 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy, with another son on the way. Right after giving birth to their second child, she received a Facebook invite to the baptism of her abuser's child, she said. Without even thinking, I wrote this whole blog post about it all, she said. I got to the end and was like, I'm done staying silent. It was the first time Greenfield had publicly talked about her abuse. It was liberating enough that I kept doing it, she said. Slowly but surely, every time it would be like this breath of release. Advocating for victims has now become somewhat of a full-time job, she said. I would have never pictured this, but it's become one of the most profound and beautiful things in my life, she said. I do this because I know it is still happening in churches everywhere, and for a fact in Christchurch. Greenfield, is it happening in churches everywhere? I know it happens, but this church seems a bit exceptional. Well, I'm not saying there aren't other churches like Christchurch, but I think that because she's been brought, she might have a skewed view and think that they're all like that. But I understand what she means, that there's a lot of other churches that are doing the same thing, but that's because there's a lot of other churches under that umbrella of this organisation, Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, different countries, different states. I don't know what this bit means. I don't know what any of that means. Presbytery. All right, we're not looking at that. So I can believe that a lot of those are like that. I mean, here we go. This isn't just a victim problem, it's all of our problem, she said. Sharing stories and listening to others is important because it connects people to real victims and real attacks, she said. During her talk on campus, she expressed the importance of compassionate listening, not only to benefit the community and awareness of the issue, but for the healing of those sharing their stories. And she talks about compassionate listening. Just saying sorry, it's time to move on is patronising. Yeah, I feel like too many, especially in the UK with the NHS as it is, I think the focus is too much to fix somebody quickly. And you haven't even, all you get are 6 counselling sessions. And there's a lot of people who might have only just started to open up to somebody after 6 counselling sessions, and it might take a few, and it might take a few more. It could take all of those. They may not have even started, or you may not even want that. Personally, when I had 6 counselling sessions, I was reluctant to start talking to somebody who I was only going to have 6 sessions with. What was the point? And I think sometimes there needs to be less focus on how do we change this and that, and it almost feels like a bit like victim blaming, counselling does, because it's like, well, you need to rationalise it, and it's like, so you are invalidating people by saying that. You're saying that people need to rationalise their thoughts is calling them irrational, and even if they were irrational, calling them irrational is not going to help. So, and when people are, and often I think you can be in 2 different states. You can be a state that you're in counselling, or any other time when you can rationalise things, and then you can go into another state. For example, if people go into a panic state, or if they have PTSD and have a flashback, it's not about rationalising things, because you haven't. I think what is being missed, and sorry that I'm going into this, but I'm going to anyway, is that on those occasions, the thought doesn't come first, the feeling comes first. And that's what's being missed here. People are thinking, well, don't think like that and you won't feel like that. But that's not which way round it is. You have a feeling, and then that produces thoughts, because often that feeling is horrific. When you have all physical symptoms, your heart starts beating at a rate that it should not be beating unless you've been sprinting, and you're breathing, you just can't get control of it. It's absolutely terrifying. And these things often happen before a thought, because they're triggered by something that you might not even notice, something that your conscious mind doesn't notice. So this is and I think there's much to be said about just going somewhere and talking to somebody and doing that week in, week out. In fact, I just have found that I'm just better when I am in counselling, but it's just the amount of money that it costs. It's much, but not in counselling if you know it's going to stop in a few weeks' time. That's just not helpful. And that's why they're going around in circles with it. If somebody had a problem it was that easy to solve, they probably would have solved it themselves. It's much easier to form these ideas of how a victim should heal without actually talking to a victim. We need a lot of public education. Sexual abuse victims have a lot of PTSD, she said. My abuse ended 14 years ago and I had a panic attack 2 weeks ago. It will always be a part of her story, she said. 2 UI undergraduate students also shared their stories of abuse, both sexual and domestic, and their healing journeys Thursday during... Sorry, I don't know if I've read that wrong or if it's strangely written. And their healing journeys Thursday during the talk titled Listen to Me. Their healing journey is on Thursday, is that what they mean? Okay. That would be interesting if there was a way of finding that out. Listen to me.